Hello and welcome to our February community stream. Today I have a special guest, the Executive Director of the Bytecode Alliance, David Bryant. Hey, David.
Hello, Bailey.
So
Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Great to be part of the monthly community stream. Thanks for having
we've
me.
got lots of things to chat about today,
We do.
and I
We do.
figure one of the first things would be maybe the Plumber Summit.
Sure. Yeah. So for folks that maybe haven't been following along at home, Plumber Summit is, we can talk separately about where the name came from. But it's an event we organize. We now had the second one. And generally, the idea is to try and time these things out so that they happen at important inflection points in the collective progress of the projects that we're orchestrating as the Bytecode Alliance. Not all of them are ours or whatever, but we sort of, every now and then you just get the sense that it's time to get people together and work on something. And we did one about this time last year,
Yep.
which was really very focused on preview 2. It's like WASI preview 2. We got a bunch of stuff to do. Let's get everybody together. Let's huddle up, figure it out, and then go do it. And I think that was a good experience for people, and it worked. It had a significant impact on preview 2. And so we sort of organically got the idea it was time to do it again. And we had one last of January 31st, February 1st, in Raleigh, North Carolina. So same idea. Felt like the time to do it. Yeah, exactly. We can talk about that too. Felt like the time to do it. Raleigh was a great place. Bailey was a great host. And it was like squared of the first one. Because unlike the first one where we were really focused kind of on a single topic on preview 2 and what was it and how are we going to get there, this time we kind of had two sort of work streams or mind streams. One of them was the sort of what happens with preview 2, where does it go next, and what's the plan there? Because there were a bunch of things queued up to be part of that evolution of preview 2 and the roadmap there. And then there was, well, what else? Preview 3, I don't know, is there preview 4, preview 53? What is the longer term roadmap, and how are we getting to 1.0? And so we were able to organize the event, we invited all of our member organizations, all of our recognized contributors. We kind of put the word out. A lot of people came to Raleigh. We had people remote that participated, and we got people together for 2 days to work on that. So we had kind of the two major work streams. We had a very focused agenda the first day on topics related to those two work streams. And then we had kind of an unconference approach for the second day, which let people build on what happened in the first day, but also bring in other topics that were relevant to the projects they were working on, or maybe multiple projects wanted to talk about something that they were trying to accomplish together. So good event, I think, sort of reinforced the benefit of doing it. And we've even been talking already, and sort of like, yay, we did it. When's the next one? So we've already started to think about how do we anticipate in the time frame of the work that's come out of that, both in the 0.2 or the preview 2 evolutionary stream, but also preview 3 and other things. When do we think would be a good time, and how do we begin to sort of marshal the energy to do that? And I think one of the other big benefits, and I'll stop, was it intersected a bunch of other work. And so we had people working on things that weren't really related to WASI Preview 2, weren't necessarily related to the evolution and the roadmap, but they sort of intersected in ways that were relevant across multiple teams and projects. And they kind of bubbled to the top and found some traction at the Plumber Summit. And so we're going to talk about some of them, I know, later on in the community stream today. The work on documentation, some work in other areas, other domains that are now sort of excited seeing the component model and other things out there, ready to kind of start to pivot and catch up. And so the Plumber Summit was great about sparking some of those conversations and getting those things going. So great event. I think we enjoyed it. Raleigh was great. My first trip to Raleigh. Food halls are an excellent idea. They should be everywhere. And thanks for hosting, and really looking forward to talking more about the various things that have come out of that, as we're going to do here, but then also seeing some of that work build and getting folks back together maybe in the fall.
Yeah, in the fall, we're kind of thinking maybe October, kind of around the conference season, maybe heading off some of them, but not all of them. It's hard to pin that down. It's going to depend on venue.
Yeah, and it's it's not really a conference kind of thing. It's a very much a working meeting, but it's not let's have one because we haven't had one, or I hear Tahiti's nice this time of year. It's
yeah,
there's stuff that needs to get done. and putting people together in a room, everybody just sort of spontaneously recognizes that, yeah, we should do that. And you have to imagine it'll happen again. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. There's something special about designing and brainstorming over some really good food. There's just you just really can't beat
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Well,
So
it's great
yeah.
to get a chance to like load up on pimento cheese and
Yes.
yeah, spicy food too. Or Carolina Reapers come into play. So it was a good event, and I think people are already, like I said, looking forward to the next one. I think we also did a good job. In case people are wondering about this, we did a good job mixing the local and remote, so it wasn't all about food halls and whatever. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too, and even use some of the tools. But I think we're really getting pretty sophisticated at staging these things. Bailey had set up kind of a hot seat with a camera and a microphone so that everybody that was presenting more live online, really, than I think they were to the people in the room. And I think it was great to be able to do that because we've got projects and contributors and member organizations around the world, and we really want these things to be something that everybody can participate in. So we're getting better at that too, I think.
Yeah, part of the reason why we flip-flop the times every month, we run this community stream last Tuesday every month. In case you haven't noticed, right now it's 9 o'clock my time, EST. But in theory, Asia Pacific should be waking up, getting into their day jobs, and should be able to hop on and hang with us. So trying to alternate the stream is so that we can facilitate more folks all around the world because we have so many contributors everywhere.
Yeah, and to that end, we
I thought
also
it was
recorded
oh,
everything, right? And so just like we
yes.
record this stream and it's available in our YouTube channel, all of the content from the Plumber Summit was recorded as it happened live. It's available here in our YouTube channel. It was great because we had a real writer in the room for both days who was sort of, dialed into the technologies, but also into capturing things. And so we got two great articles, one about each day of the event on our website on bytecodealliance.org in the news area that will walk people through the topics and the links to content and the agenda and everything else. So you can recreate the experience on your own thanks to the power of YouTube and the web. And that's another thing that I think we want to try and do going forward. So.
Yeah, I loved being able to have Eric there. Let me drop this. Here's a link to the article. It kind of took the pressure off of some things because we knew somebody was capturing, live notes, some actions that we needed to take, that type of thing. I'll also give a shout that if anybody is a video editor, I'm not. Maybe that's surprising to some folks since I run this live stream every month, but I don't have video editing skills. And I think it would be some of those talks that people gave, like Luke's acing talk, were so good that, I should, bare minimum, I should probably go back through and at least drop in the description the times when different things happen so that people can jump in the time because, hey, if you want to see me for 8 hours, 2 days straight, that's an option for you, but I don't really recommend it. So I think us breaking those up into separate videos might be really helpful too, and get rid of some of the dead time because I didn't. It's just easier not to turn things off.
Well, we
and
still had
to
people in
walk
the
away,
room,
take a
right? So
break
we
and
had
stuff.
to, take breaks and
Yeah.
do other stuff. So it was a little bit of both. But yeah, that'd be great.
I thought it'd also be fun to show that we're running this on the same mirror that we ran our Plumber Summit work on. And this is kind of a virtual version of what it was like running it. And, we were able to have this basically a whiteboard that everybody can work on. We could talk about all the things that we wanted to get into, the next release. And I also enjoyed folks setting some of their goals for it, which is, very much around planning and getting a chance to work together and also celebrate our big successes that we had just landed. I think that was the other part about it for why it was such a good timing is that we just finished this huge chunk of work, WASI P2, and it's kind of like, wow, okay, that was cool. Let's party a little, and also let's figure out what we do next since the work's not done yet.
Yeah, and the energy and enthusiasm for that, I think, also was what motivated people to take part. I think we had people that were there. They're like, I'm still euphoric after the preview 2 release. That was great. What's next, right? What are we going to work on now, and how are we going to contribute? So it was great to be able to celebrate that and recognize the accomplishments of the teams involved. So.
And like you said, I think a lot of the updates that we can run through now filter back to things that were kicked off from the Plumber Summit.
Yep.
So let's
What's
start
next?
stepping through those. Let's start with some SIGs. So we have SIG guest languages, and then we have language working groups within SIG guest languages. I'm going to start with Go. I wanted to give a shout out to a major new milestone that was just hit in the past week. Randy Reddick and Damien, both are Fastly engineers. They told me today, and I wanted to quote them on this one, "Hello Watson" moment for this work, where basically they've been working towards having an idiomatic Go bindgen, and so that basically has happened and been realized where it worked end to end against a command, which is like the WASI CLI piece. So that command looks basically like this. So we were able to take types and generate idiomatic Go bindings from those types. We've been doing a lot of work there. Joe, also alias Masaka, did original bindgens with Rust, but we recognize that using CGO, that's not a fan favorite for Gophers, and it also does some things that are very rusty because it's inside, written in Rust. So by being able to write it in idiomatic Go, there's some key benefits. One, Gophers will like it a lot more because it doesn't require CGO, but also we have an opportunity to be able to embed it into the upstream Go standard library. So this kind of Gopherization of a lot of the tools that we're using to build WebAssembly components and WASI is continuing. So it's not done yet, but this is kind of what it looks like right now today. If you want to build it, you gotta use Damien's branch, where he's been doing a ton of work inside TinyGo. That's why I want to definitely give Damien a shout here. We've got this WASI Preview 2 branch that they've been iterating rapidly on, and if you target WASI P2, you're able to get basically a module out, and then run some tools to add basically the component metadata so that we can make it act as a component, and then boom, bada bing, you're able to run WASM time run. So this is basically what I meant by the end-to-end demo that Randy created. And for Damien's update today, he said that he almost has most of the Preview 2 syscalls. Now, that's not all of Preview 2. It doesn't include the WASI HTTP side, but most of the WASI CLI pieces. So like file system was something that was a challenge. And so he's almost done porting all of those over into basically this runtime module within TinyGo. And so what that sort of means is that you can write normal Go code, and it just kind of compiles to WASM without you necessarily seeing WASI and all that stuff being in your face, which is really nice. So the summary here is we're working towards idiomatic Go, and it's going to feel great. And so thank you very much to our contributors there. They did give me another update. Now I want to add like all the caveats because they gave me plenty, which is, engineers are optimistic, but right now our goal, and it's more than just Damien and Randy working on this. There's maybe up to 6 engineers right now that I'm aware of that are actively working on this, like Achille, who is putting in different proposals like WASM export to Big Go. And when we say Big Go, we mean like the main, upstream Go. The next major release of Go, well, I guess technically it's a minor, 123 of Go, is going to come out at the end of August. And so our goal today is to be able to get WASI P2, so full component model and WASI P2 support in Big Go. Yep. The caveats, right? Aggressive goals, honest status. I was on a team, and that was kind of our mantra there. So I'll keep you apprised of the status. There's a couple different proposals that have to land to make this work well inside Big Go. But once those work, I think a lot of the other paths are a lot more straightforward. But it is going to involve more work in Gopherizing some of the WASM tools pieces, because TinyGo is a little bit more relaxed about being able to shell out to random Rust CLIs, but Big Go's not going to go for that, and they're going to need it to be written in Go so it can be embedded into the SDK. So that type of work needs to happen. We'd love more contributors to hop on, although I will say that our Go workstream feels extremely well resourced right now with basically the key maintainers that you would want to see from both TinyGo and Big Go. So really, really excited about that. for another work stream that's maybe a lot more earlier in the phase, but is a good time to join. And they have asked for more hands to come knock some of this work out. That's the C# and .NET working group. So Timmy got past a major hurdle today for the variant side of the language bindings. And then we also identified fairly recently that they're going to want a common, basically, SDK is not the right word. The word that the .NET core maintainer used when talking about it was assembly. I'm not a .NET person, so I'm just going to use this word there, but basically a library that has all of the common types that we reuse in bindings generation, and that's going to go inside cm.net. And then there's this suite of sort of tools and things that you have to call, not that different from what I was showing here, where there's kind of a series of steps that you do today to be able to create a component. We want to be able to wrap that into something that's kind of cohesive, a verb that we use throughout the ecosystem, like componentize Pi. So we opted to say componentize.net. So this is going to include all the kind of the developer ergonomics. It's user facing versus cm.net is going to be deep in there. Most users probably won't directly interact with cm.net. So there's a ton of other work happening in the other languages, but just for this month, I wanted to give a shout for those 2 work streams that are making really good progress. On to SIG docs. I'd like to pass that to you, David, since you've been helping bootstrap this one.
Sure. And sorry, one of the things I enjoy being able to do with my executive director hat on is kind of help groups of members and contributors kind of realize they have an interest in something to the point where they like to formally form a special interest group, which we have a mechanism for doing. So we've had a couple of them, and more is good. We've had a couple come in the last month or so, some a little earlier than that. I think the one that got started a little earlier was SIG Docs, which is maybe just before the holidays, where folks said, there's an opportunity. There's all this great work happening in code and demos and stuff. Like we could devote some energy. Some of us are maybe a little more focused on the documentation side of things. And so, we have a simple model for creating new SIGs. It's in the TSC charter. They proposed a working group to help out with documentation in and around all of our projects and the work that the Bytecode Alliance projects are working on with WebAssembly. And so we're like, that's great, let's do it. And so actually tomorrow, by happy coincidence, is the first formal meeting of SIG documentation, which we'll probably call SIG Docs, but technically SIG documentation. Meeting online. It'll be recorded, available for people to join. Happy conversation about it on our Zulip server for people who are signing up or getting the information. We have a new events calendar that we want to share, which we'll talk about here maybe later. But we're going to start putting our SIG meetings and whatnot on it. You'll see this. The 2 things on there now are right here with the community stream, and then tomorrow's SIG documentation meeting. So the fresh off the presses calendar, but SIG documentation. Kate Goldenring has been the orchestrator there, sort of the instigator, and has organized the meeting for tomorrow. So if you're interested in the documentation, contributing to it, have ideas about where we should focus our time and energy, we've had lots of good suggestions there. Not just about better documentation for the technology, but where do new developers start? What's the learning path? How do people onboard? What are good first ways to get involved? So first meeting tomorrow for that one, and then in the same time window, we've also had a group of people that's interested in embedded, in the sort of a broad term. But certainly a lot of common overlapping use cases and interest. And so SIG Embedded, another lively discussion on our Zulip server for folks that are member companies and contributors that are really interested in helping evolve the tool chain and the tools and the language support and additional ancillary libraries and system tools and other things to really make embedded awesome. From a WebAssembly perspective and meet the needs there. So they have not scheduled their first meeting, but I anticipate it happening pretty soon. And so you should see more news about SIG Embedded, or if you're already on our Zulip server, you'll see the news there, getting that up and running and people expressing an interest in supporting the formation of the SIG. So love to see that model. And as we mentioned earlier, it's the kind of thing that's going to weave its way into future plumber summits and activities at that level too. So extra dimensions of great work being done across the landscape.
There's just this really exciting cabal of people. I want to
In
highlight
a good
Bosch
sense. We
and
mean cabal in a
Siemens.
good sense. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I do.
Yeah.
I mean it in the hardware's hard. As a software engineer, writing things for hardware is hard.
Well,
And
and that's
there are
been one of the
specific
great things
problem
about following the
spaces
discussion on
challenging.
Zulip is this is there's a lot of people who are like, I'm off, this is great, I support this SIG, and I'm on board, and when can we get started? And then all the questions start to roll in. What's the minimum hardware
Yes.
footprint, and what's the minimum system footprint, and are we talking about things that don't have an operating system, or how do I blink an LED? And so just all of this discussion all swirling around together under this broader umbrella, and we'll see what that means over time. But yeah, it is hard, and living close to it is hard, but it brings new things into the mix that we want to be able to take advantage of. So a lively discussion, to be sure, and one that I think is going to grow rapidly as more people get involved. So check it out.
Yeah,
That's right.
these organizations, I think, are really onto something, where they're solving a problem that's very difficult. We have all these HALs and other words that I'm just now learning about in the embedded world, and it's very, very, very difficult to release software, to build digital twins for it, to be able to write in an ergonomic high-level language for it. And the fact that they've found that WebAssembly might actually be the best answer for this is just so exciting.
Yep.
So that's where a lot of that's happening. I also love that they haven't started yet, which means they're going to follow the golden path. That another thing I love is that SIGDocs is already serving its purpose, and that Kate started a series of documentation steps for how to onboard a SIG, and what are the right steps to follow, what are some good best practices as a chair to create your inaugural meeting, nominate your co-chair, and what are some of the tools that they might want to use, and help me help you by having a series of steps for the types of tools that you might need. It's wonderful. So
Yeah, and all of our SIGs
hopefully
are
SIG Embedded will be our next one.
They're open to the public.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
not just like members only or whatever. And so we want the best practices here to be ones that are built around that. So we want everybody to know. We want the tools to be out there, the discussions, the notes, the minutes, the meeting agendas, et cetera, how to participate. We really want all of that to be open and transparently available to everyone. And so working through this experimentally with the SIG documentation team, kind of as the guinea pig here, has been great. To capture, as we're figuring out how we really want to do this well, what does it look like, and how do we then quickly make that practices that the other SIGs can follow, both some of the ones that are out there now that we can kind of catch up to on some of this, and then other new ones that are coming along like SIG Embedded. So
Yeah, and I guess another aspect here is that we're also trying to make it easy for people to find these meetings, and that plays into the events calendar that you set up. And then we're also working on having a Google Groups effectively for each SIG, and that also makes it a lot easier, I think, for folks to manage and get added. And we're using that technique basically to filter in events into the calendar, which is really nice. Things that we didn't have set up a month ago, but identified by several folks also at the Plumber Summit. So yeah, I'm very excited to get that underway. I'm going to move on into another discussion that we had at the Plumber Summit. David, do you want to give your recount of it? It's a little weird for me because I'm the WASI co-chair, so it's kind of like maybe
sure.
you give it. I stole these from the slides that Pat and I gave during the meeting last week.
Yeah, and so I mentioned there were the sort of the two work streams or kind of thought streams that the Plumber Summit was woven around, and one was this one. It was like, okay, we did preview 2, it's out there, it's great, we're still excited about the release. Now what happens next? And so there were some things that were selectively deferred out of preview 2 that people wanted to still get in at some point. So how are we going to do that? We were still calling it preview 2. And you'll see even this slide kind of mixes the nomenclature. There was this sort of realization / inflection point in the naming of things. They're like, well, I don't know, maybe preview 2. We had some people who were like, I'm not sure. Does that mean I should wait to do something with it, or is it okay to get started now? What's the deal? And so also at the Plumber Summit, we sort of said, okay, maybe we should just start calling it 0.2. And that helps us with a number of things. One is that we've got these other features that we kind of deferred, other work that we deferred out of it. So we can start talking about where do they land in an evolution of 0.2 and what do we call those things? And pretty quickly people gravitated towards a description like you see here, kind of a train model approach where we're going to try and get releases out. We haven't figured the cadence out exactly, but it's going to be, measured in some small integer number of months. Not quarters or years. And so the idea is to start putting together, and people worked on this at the Plumber Summit. It's like, okay, well, let's hypothesize that there's a 0.2.1. What goes in it? And how do we scope it in such a way that it delivers real value, but it also helps us build the machinery and get habituated to a train model and releases and getting stuff out there and getting going and constructively plan, okay, well, maybe this should go into 0.2.2 or a 0.2.3. And so we can have those conversations, and people at the Plumber Summit spend time working on that, some of which you'll see here, which is, okay, this conceptual framework here, train model, multiple releases built off of the 0.2. How do we talk about semantic versioning? How do we talk about backwards compatibility? How do we, manage all of those things from a release perspective and still get done this work that we need to do? And so that led to the conversation, which I think this slide came from the YZ subgroup, which was sort of percolating that energy and thinking back into starting to compartmentalize and put things, line them up against releases in the train. So,
yeah, that's a really great summary. I love
this
it.
maybe, but that was really
Sure.
a big, because it was tempting to say, okay, well, yay, the preview 2's out now. Everybody's all excited about preview 3, and there was just as much excitement in the room about the evolution of preview 2 and turning it into 0.2 as there was about what's coming next in the big turn of the crank. So,
and explaining to people why we were so excited about adding to preview 2 was also a friction point. Like, there was this initial wait, hang on, preview 1 came out, it was a monolith. You just released preview 2. Why would you be focused on that one still when you already have told me there's a preview 3 incoming, right?
Yep.
And the reality is that we just did a couple years of work to be able to modularize our interfaces so that we can have these versioned interfaces that we're able to incrementally add to. So all of these that we're talking about for the preview 2 timeframe are all additive, non-breaking changes. That's a key point here. And then I think another cool thing that we aligned on, and cool because it's what I wanted, is that we decided for 0.2.1 that we're going to make it like a very small, very contained change, because the part that's important about 0.2.1 is that we have the tools and the ability to release 0.2.1. So that's where we're going to spend all of our effort. And there's this piece of work that Colin Murphy had already written and already has test for. It's just released now already in Capstud. He's undrafted his PR to WASM time. So that's checking along as far as implementation goes to have this, number one step done. So, thank you, Colin. But also that was probably the easy part here. We got some more work to do for being able to support these point releases across the ecosystem. And then there's lots of other candidates. So once we agreed on that, then everybody's jockeying for their favorite thing to show up in 0.2.2. So that part was very interesting as well in the stream, I think. I think everybody has a little bit here, and we intentionally kept that incomplete because it's too hard to pick our favorites. And I think the other thing that you kind of highlighted, David, that's worth calling out again is just that the preview, what does that even mean? It's a word that is specific to the standard body
right.
within the WASI subgroup, right? It's not a standard yet. It is an early stage proposal. And so we can't call it a standard. We got to call it preview. We could have called it snapshot as another word, but you usually would never use that either, because you could snapshot basically as something that's in draft. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. We're using preview in the standard side, but that's pretty dang scary when you're asking people like Upstream BigGo to merge that into their SDK that they have to support for years, right? That's almost like telling them to put in experimental, but no, don't worry about putting behind a flag. It's fine. People aren't so interested in that. So we probably shouldn't be communicating with preview when we're in the context of like Bytecode Alliance and more external end user tools, and outside of the standards context, we should probably not do that. So we really like the WASI 0.2, right? Because that's most folks, they know Simber, they get it, right? They understand that we're trying to create these basically additive patch releases on top of this, like that. But another thing to be aware of is that in all of these target triples, we're starting to see WASI P2 show up just about everywhere. For example, Go has it like this, right? Inside TinyGo, they forged ahead. They were the first ones to define that. And then now Rust has followed suit. We're not asking people to change their syntax grammars for being able to support a dot inside the target tuple. We were like, okay, that's way too much. So let's keep the P. And we know that it kind of does mean WASI preview 2, but it could also mean WASI 0.2. That's the idea, anyways. So there you go. That's the news on that front. I hope it's not too confusing. If it is, well, we kind of recognize that the language is hard and comms are hard, and it is what it is at this point. I want to also roll into an update on WASMtime 18. So WASMtime 17 is the release that we cut right when we cut WASI P2. We are like, boom, it's done. We did it. So WASMtime 17 is on 0.2.0 versions of all the interfaces. But just a few days ago, we released WASMtime 18. Now, there were a lot of good updates, a lot of just mostly, enhancements. There is one change that I wanted to highlight out of the releases doc that, we're working towards deprecating some of that P1 API preview one sides of things and getting users migrated to basically mostly consuming the WASI P2 APIs that we've created. So I want to go ahead and highlight that, since that first deprecation warning first shows up in WASMtime 18, so you'll probably see that when you start pulling it in. But otherwise, that's sort of my round of updates from basically the Bytecode Alliance. Let's see. I feel like there were a lot of other things that we wanted to talk about in terms of what came out of the Plumber Summit. I guess, people might be wondering when we're going to put out an updated roadmap. What do you think about that, David?
Well, I think this was a thing that we learned from last year's Plumber Summit, was that there was a lot of work in the room. There were, Miro boards and other things. And then it took some significant effort to sort of extract from that something that we then published on our website that represented a roadmap. And I think we want to do that too this time. I think it'll be, because we haven't talked about it much here. We talked a lot about 0.2 and the preview 2 kind of threads at the Plumber Summit. There was quite a bit of discussion about 0.3 and sort of the roadmap sort of beyond. So yes, evolution of 0.2, train model, there's stuff coming, that's cool. There's a 0.3 with a very strong flavor around async, doing the async work and getting that in there. And then I think there's also a growing sense that the next step after that, especially from what you highlighted, Bailey, from a standards perspective, is really going to be putting ourselves in the position to pursue the formal standards, the 1.0, that sort of stuff. So there's sort of the async other shoe to drop here that's going to come in as part of 0.3 and a bunch of work there. And that really squares us up to satisfy the various requirements and milestones from the formal standardization process to really begin to start thinking about a 1.0 with release candidates and the standards and the documentation and the other things. And so I think there's just bits and pieces of all of those separate threads that would really be great for us to be able to kind of knit together. And then, of course, we can link to the videos to give people kind of a summary. So maybe a little easier in some ways to do the roadmap. But yeah, I think that's a thing we want to try and do. And certainly welcome feedback and questions from folks about that, so that we can kind of recap the key takeaways from those work streams at the Plumber Summit to give everybody a feel for all of those things happening all at the same time.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty interesting that it looks like we've already come up with a way to parallelize a lot of that work. So we will be making P2 releases while we're actively working on P3. And I think that's a good thing. And Not only that, but Joel Dice's demo just totally blew my mind
Yeah,
that
I
he
was
was
going to
able to
mention that
figure
too,
out how
because
to,
you know,
like,
we
prototype
started
that.
talking
Go
about these
ahead.
things like they're separate. There's like the 0.2 work and there's the 0.3, and there's like, but there's this wormhole that got built sort of between the two universes that Joel Dice built, ISIS WAFSA, which is an acronym. If you win a beer with this, maybe I sync, you sync, we all sync for async, is the acronym. And Joel actually put together a concurrency demo, a top preview 2, a top 0.2, cleverly, pulling some strings and putting some things together to demonstrate it. And so he did that like live in the middle of the Plumber Summit. So it's in the video. We should make sure we put a link into that, which is like, you can start doing some of this async work if you want to, and you can get a feel for it, because we need to be able to. There's a bunch of concepts there. There's backlog to work through. There's some how do we do things, how do we handle or a lot of the thinking that's got to come in for async. And so it was great. You can actually start playing with that now and testing ideas and experimenting. So it was definitely one of those, right, which is like, but wait, there's more. You can have both, and work on both at the same time. So I think we're going to see that. We're going to see evolution of 0.2. We're going to see the new work that's going to be sort of maybe demonstrated on top of 0.2.x that helps us frame what we're going to do in 0.3. And then other people are going to be thinking about 1.0. So I don't know. The next Plumber Summit, maybe we have like 3 work streams or something. I guess we'll figure it out when we get there.
I mean, perfectly possible. There were definitely different groups forming and iterating in really cool ways. The discussion around host components was also one of my favorites. And the I had been, apprised of a lot of that, but my favorite part of it was when folks started iterating on the idea towards the end. It's like, yeah, you're right. We don't want to expand our trusted compute base. We probably do need to figure out this RPC thing. We want to make sure we set this up in a way that's like really consumable and flexible. And it's like, oh well, hey, and I think it was Land's idea to put a component inside on the WASM time side for the thing that will make the RPC call. So just the iteration of the design was really, really fun there. And I think that's going to be a huge increment. We're heading quickly out of Q1 at this point, but a Q2 increment that I'm expecting to land so that we can iterate even faster on a lot of these providers. And when I say provider, I mean code that right now probably couldn't compile to WASM, or most folks would choose not to because they want some level of hardware optimization. Neural networking is an example of that for running inferencing. For other folks, it would be like, maybe making some of your database queries and being stateful versus a lot of your guest component side. A lot of folks, the way they embed WASM time is have it be stateless. A lot of things like that. And what that would allow us to do is to create basically these provider interfaces and iterate on, for example, all of the WASI Cloud Core interfaces that we want to build, like key value and blob store and messaging and yada yada yada, all those without making it the WASM time maintainer's problem to figure out how blob stores work, right? And to pull in all those blob store dependencies directly into WASM time mainline. Like that was something that we were realizing with WASI-NN and Onyx and a lot of those other Python-y things. The WASM time maintainers were like, hey, we vet with cargo. And that's not all. That's not all within our realm of things that we consider as part of our trusted compute base, and definitely not things that we're experts in. So I think that is going to make things overall more maintainable, but also more secure. So that's something that I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah, and I think that thinking you were just describing prompted some of the discussion in the unconference day 2 part around WASI-NN and WASI SQL and other things where people are like, okay, we've sort of absorbed what we talked about yesterday. Let's pick a couple of these other things that we didn't talk about yesterday and see what we think today. And so we had, I think those 2 sessions actually happened simultaneously. There was enough sort of interest and enthusiasm. We just did them in 2 halves of the same large room. So a lot of that, I think, that we didn't capture on video. And it'll be good for us to figure out how to actually sort of encourage people to get the word out about the follow-on activities that are happening there.
Yeah, I think that part did show up
Did it?
in the Zoom call.
Good.
Yeah, and
Good.
we did make a recording of the other Zoom call, but I do need to, I think,
You
load
got to
that
figure out
one
how to
to
upload
the
that one to
Bytecode
the,
Alliance YouTube.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's yes, my laptop was the main controller for the Zoom, so that worked. It was good and bad, right? It meant that I stayed on task the whole day, which was great, but bad in that I didn't get to play around at all, respond to my friends in
Well,
Slack and stuff. But
you did bring your, your Steam Deck. So
it's true, I did. I was ready in case anybody wanted have a challenge. But anyways, yes, I like that one. I think it's hard to say what you want to do. Well, it's easy to say what you want to do. It's a lot harder to say what you need to choose not to do. And I think that was one of the things where we were trying to sort through of like, we recognize that it's very, very difficult to create a generic SQL provider. But what we can do is if we're able to easily add providers to WASM-Time over the RPC interface, then maybe what we do is we make them specific to the lingua franca of whatever you're using. Like let's make a Postgres provider, and let's make a DynamoDB one, and let them be very specific to their use case, because that 80/20 rule that we're generally using for a lot of these interfaces where it'll solve most people's use cases is not great for something like SQL, where you're going to really stub your toe real quick if it doesn't do exactly what you're expecting and you've optimized that query in a certain way. So I think we ended up in a good place there. So I was really happy about that.
it was good to have that
And
conversation, to circle back around to those domains and use cases, and make sure we were sort of, the thinking was all woven together there, because it's more of that's going to happen when you think about SIG embedded, right? Some of the, they're going to come at these things from a different perspective, but still have use cases that they want to solve for. So sort of decoupling and enabling is something that we're going to have to figure out more of, not less. And it'll be good to get people working on that.
yeah, so I expect the theme of this year is that we're going to be figuring out how to build better than we had before. Last year it was for WasmCon. Oh, I was wearing this shirt earlier, and I swapped out to my Bytecode
Good
Alliance
choice.
t-shirt. It was the WasmCon shirt. I think it's better together.
Better together.
Was the what we were pushing for, because that's the whole point of building an alliance, and this is too big of a problem for any one org to solve. And so I think now what I pitched was let's figure out how to build better together. And building better in that, let's figure out how to iterate even faster, because we've now got these modular interfaces. We're going to build these plugins to WasmTime. We figured out really cool ways to go ahead and start prototyping async for basically guests to be able to pretend like they're able to work with a native async implementation of the component model. So we should be able to parallelize just a lot of this work. And I think what comes with that is we're really excited to bring on more contributors. It's no longer the case where we're worried about experiencing the mythical man month type problem, where it felt like we were all hands on deck getting the component model released and WASI P2 launched. But it was also stuff that we couldn't really parallelize. Whereas now it's really about let's expand our community. Let's expand the number of contributors. We have people who have time to mentor, and they're amazing mentors. Imagine learning some of the the OG folks behind a lot of the crates they use today. So it's a great opportunity, and really love to have anybody that's interested. And if there's an area that you're into, you can post in Zulip asking for help, or to be directed. You can ping me or David directly.
Absolutely.
I love working as kind of like a control flow bus to get people directed to the right spot.
And I think
it's time. So
I'll be bold and say that whatever it is people may be interested in, there are other people out there that are interested in the same thing. I think we've seen this pretty consistently. And so, you can float a kind of a tentative idea in Zulip, and what you'll suddenly find is there's a whole bunch of other people that are, interested. Yeah, me too. And I'd like to support that. And so it's great to see the conversations happening around that. Early last year was a lot of, is it ready for me to start using it for stuff? And now it's like, yeah. And we also want to talk about other things that we'd like to be able to do to get it to be useful for more stuff. You've got other things in your roadmap, other, things, plans you've got for your products. What else do we do? How do we make it small so that you can, put it in something you can wear, or, whatever. And so those things are all happening. And I think Zulip has been a great tool for us, for people to have those conversations and kind of identify each other's. And maybe that's why we're suddenly seeing SIGs show up, as people have the opportunity to kind of get together and do that. So looking forward to more of that as 2024 unfolds.
Yeah, 1000% more of that. Don't be shy, reach out, communicate.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think we've hit all of the topics that I wanted to bring. So thank you, David, for being on. I know actually you're normally in the background when I'm doing these community
I
streams.
worried a little bit
You're
about
usually
the
here.
questions, because usually that's what I'm paying attention to, is like, are there questions on YouTube? Are there questions on Zulip, whatever? And so hopefully we haven't missed any of that. I don't think so, but yeah, it's been great being here, Bailey. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to what's coming next.
Yeah, if folks have questions, please direct them in Zulip. We'll catch you over there. So thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Or where?
Yeah, or right. Email us or something. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you're David at bytecodealliance.org. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll catch you online.
Right. See you next